August 31st, 1888. Whitechapel, London. Mary Ann Nichols lies dead in Buck's Row. Her throat cut so deeply the vertebrae are visible. But it's what was done to her abdomen that makes the police surgeon step back in horror. This isn't murder for theft. This isn't murder for passion. The cuts are deliberate, almost surgical. Someone took their time, and within weeks, 4 more women will die the same way, their bodies arranged like offerings, their organs removed with precision that suggests either medical knowledge or something far darker. For over a century, the world has obsessed over Jack the Ripper's identity. Was he a doctor, a royal, a butcher? But there's another theory that's been whispered in the shadows of true crime history, one that explains not just the brutality, but the ritual nature of the killings. What if Jack the Ripper wasn't a lone madman? What if he was performing sacrifices for a Victorian occult society that operated in the darkest corners of London's elite? Welcome to Cult Files. Tonight we investigate the theory that refuses to die. The possibility that Victorian London's most infamous serial killer was actually a cultist carrying out ritual murders. The evidence that connects these crimes to satanic practices, secret societies, and the occult underground that flourished beneath the gas-lit streets of 1888. This is the story of how 5 women became victims, not just of a killer, but possibly of something far more organized and sinister. How their mutilations followed patterns that occultists would recognize, and how the investigation may have been deliberately sabotaged by powerful people who had everything to lose. The scent of death and incense, the Victorian era, and the birth of modern occultism. Welcome to the darkest file we've ever opened. Victorian London in 1888 was a city of contrasts, so extreme they felt like different worlds existing in the same space. In Mayfair and Belgravia, the wealthy attended seances and joined esoteric orders, like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded that same year. Occultism wasn't fringe anymore, it was fashionable. Educated men and women believed they could contact the dead, perform magic, and unlock ancient spiritual secrets through ritual. But 5 miles east in Whitechapel, another kind of darkness thrived. This was London's most desperate slum, where 30,000 people crammed into rotting tenements, where gin was cheaper than bread, and where women sold their bodies in dark alleys just to afford a bed for the night. The streets smelled of sewage and death. Children died of starvation, while their mothers turned tricks for pennies. Into this world of desperation came a killer. But before we examine the cult theory, we need to understand what actually happened to these 5 women, because the details matter. The way they were killed, the organs that were taken, the symbols that some researchers claim were left behind, these are what fuel the theory that Jack the Ripper was more than just a murderer. Mary Ann Nichols, 43 years old, was found on August 31st. Her throat had been slashed twice, nearly decapitating her. Her abdomen was open with deep, jagged cuts. The police initially thought it was an isolated incident, brutal but singular. They were wrong. Annie Chapman died September 8th. This time, the mutilations were more extensive. Her throat cut, her abdomen completely opened, and here's where it gets disturbing. Her uterus was completely removed and taken. The medical examiner noted the cuts showed anatomical knowledge. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for and how to extract it. The body was arranged carefully, her belongings placed at her feet in a neat row. Staged, deliberate, ritualistic. Elizabeth Stride was killed September 30th, possibly interrupted before the killer could complete his work. Her throat was cut, but there were no abdominal mutilations. Some researchers believe the Ripper was disturbed mid-ritual and had to flee. That same night, less than an hour later, Catherine Eddowes died. This murder was a frenzy. Throat slashed, abdomen open in a massive wound, intestines pulled out and draped over her shoulder, her face mutilated with deliberate cuts, and most disturbingly, her left kidney and her uterus were removed and taken. The killer spent time with his body. He wasn't rushed. He was completing something that had been interrupted with stride. The final canonical victim was Mary Jane Kelly, killed November 9th. This murder was different because it happened indoors in Kelly's tiny rented room. The killer had privacy, time, and he used it. What was done to Mary Kelly goes beyond anything the other victims suffered. Her body was systematically dismantled, heart removed, face mutilated beyond recognition, organs placed around the room in what some witnesses described as a pattern. The police photographs are so disturbing they've remained largely unpublished for over a century. 5 women, 5 ritual-style murders, and then nothing. Jack the Ripper vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind a mystery that has never been solved and theories that grow darker with every examination. The Satanic cult theory rests on several disturbing elements that set these murders apart from typical serial killings. First, the organ removal. In occult practice, particularly in darker traditions, certain human organs hold symbolic power. The uterus represents creation and feminine divine energy. In some satanic rituals, its removal is symbolic of destroying that creative force, an offering to dark entities. The kidney has similar significance in certain esoteric traditions. Second, the staging. Multiple witnesses reported that the body seemed arranged, positioned deliberately. Annie Chapman's belongings were laid out at her feet. Catherine Eddowes' intestines were placed on her shoulder, not randomly discarded. Mary Kelly's organs were arranged around her room. This speaks to ritual, not rage. Third, the timing. The murders occurred on specific dates that some occult researchers claim correspond to important dates in certain dark, magical calendars. While this is debated, the fact that the killings suddenly stopped after November suggests either completion of a ritual cycle or the killer achieving whatever purpose he had. Fourth, the letters. While most of the hundreds of Ripper letters were hoaxes, a few contained language that occult experts find significant. References to blood offerings, mentions of sacred purpose, and symbols that align with Victorian-era occult iconography. The theory that truly gained traction involves not just random occultism, but organized society involvement. The most prominent version of this theory centers on a group of powerful Victorian men who belonged to secret esoteric orders and who may have used Whitechapel prostitutes as ritual sacrifices. The name that appears most frequently in this theory is Dr. William Gull, Queen Victoria's personal physician, and a member of the Freemasons. In some versions of the cult theory, Gull was either the killer himself or the orchestrator of the murders, performed by an initiate as part of a dark ritual. The theory suggests the murders were designed to either harness occult power, complete an initiation rite, or silence women who knew dangerous secrets about the royal family. Another suspect connected to occult theory is the artist Walter Sickert. Sickert was obsessed with the Ripper murders, painting them repeatedly, sometimes with disturbing accuracy about details that were never publicly released. Some researchers believe Sickert was either involved directly or was painting scenes he witnessed. His connection to upper-class occult circles in Victorian London is documented. His paintings contain symbols that occult experts identify as esoteric markers. Then there's the Russian theory. In the 1870s, a Russian named Nikolai Vasilyev allegedly led a cult called the Shorn that murdered prostitutes in Paris as part of a twisted reform movement mixed with occult beliefs. Some theorists claim Vasiliev came to London in 1888 and continued his ritual killings in Whitechapel. The evidence for Vasiliev's existence is thin, but the Paris murders do share similarities with the Ripper killings. What makes the cult theory compelling isn't just the ritualistic nature of the murders, but the context of Victorian London's occult explosion. 1888 was the year the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was founded, one of the most influential occult organizations in history. Its members included prominent writers, doctors, and aristocrats. They practiced ceremonial magic, believed in contacting supernatural entities, and studied esoteric traditions that included blood symbolism. The Golden Dawn itself wasn't satanic, but it existed alongside darker groups that were. Victorian London had secret societies dedicated to thelemic magic, left-hand path practices, and traditions that explicitly involved sacrifice symbolism. Some of these groups met in private clubs in the West End, just miles from where the Ripper killed in the East End. The theory suggests that someone from this world, educated, wealthy, connected, used Whitechapel as a hunting ground precisely because no one would care about dead prostitutes. The women were invisible to society, perfect victims for someone who needed to perform rituals without drawing attention. There's also the matter of the police investigation itself, which was astonishingly incompetent. Evidence was lost. Witness statements were ignored. The one piece of graffiti potentially left by the killer, a message chalked on a wall near Catherine Eddowes' body that mentioned Jews, was ordered destroyed by the police commissioner before it could be photographed. Why? The official reason was to prevent anti-Semitic riots, but some researchers believe the message contained Masonic references that powerful people wanted erased. The investigation was overseen by men who belonged to the same social clubs and secret societies as the potential suspects. If the Ripper was connected to elite occult circles, the investigation may have been sabotaged from within, not because police were complicit in the murders, but because they were protecting the reputation of institutions they valued. The cult theory has its critics, and rightfully so. Most modern criminologists and historians argue that Jack the Ripper was likely a single individual, possibly with medical knowledge, possibly mentally ill, who took advantage of Whitechapel's chaos and police incompetence. The ritualistic elements, they argue, can be explained by a disturbed mind acting out fantasies, not by organized cult activity. The organ removal could be explained by someone with anatomical curiosity or medical training, not occult purpose. The staging could be the work of an organized killer, not a ritualist. And the sudden stop in murders could be explained by the killer's death, imprisonment for another crime, or emigration. The letters that mention occult themes were almost certainly hoaxes written by attention seekers who read about the murders in sensationalist newspapers. Victorian London was obsessed with the Ripper, and hundreds of people claimed responsibility or invented elaborate theories. The connection to specific suspects like Dr. Gull has been largely discredited by modern research. Gull suffered a stroke in 1887 and was partially paralyzed during the time of the murders. While he could have been an organizer rather than the physical killer, there's no concrete evidence linking him to the crimes beyond speculation. The Russian cult theory is even more questionable. No solid evidence exists that Nikolai Vasiliev was a real person, and the Paris murders attributed to him are poorly documented. It's possible the entire story was a fabrication that gained traction because it fit the narrative people wanted to believe. So why does the cult theory persist? Because it offers something that the mundane explanation doesn't, meaning the idea that 5 desperate women were butchered by a random madman is horrifying, but ultimately meaningless. The idea that they were sacrificed as part of a dark ritual by powerful men gives their deaths a narrative, however twisted. It also plays into Victorian anxieties about class, power, and the hidden lives of the elite. The same society ladies who attended seances in Mayfair were fascinated and terrified by the idea that similar occult practices in a Whitechapel could involve murder. The theory allowed people to believe that evil wasn't random. It was organized, intentional, and connected to the powerful institutions they already suspected of corruption. Modern occultists and researchers continue to examine the Ripper murders through an esoteric lens, not necessarily because they believe a cult was responsible, but because the symbolism is undeniably present. Whether that symbolism was intentional or projected by observers desperate for patterns is the question that remains unanswered. What we know for certain is that 5 women died brutal, ritualistic deaths in Whitechapel in 1888. We know Victorian London was experiencing an explosion of interest in occultism, secret societies, and esoteric practices. We know the police investigation was compromised and inadequate. And we know that over a century later, the mystery continues to generate theories that range from the mundane to the conspiratorial. The cult theory may never be proven or disproven. The evidence is circumstantial. The witnesses are long dead, and the truth is buried beneath layers of Victorian secrecy and modern speculation. But what the theory does reveal is something important about how we process unsolved evil. We want patterns. We want purpose. We want to believe that even the darkest acts follow some kind of logic, however twisted. Jack the Ripper killed in the shadows of gas-lit streets, in a city where the wealthy practiced magic upstairs while the desperate died downstairs. Whether he was a lone madman or a cultist performing dark rituals, the terror he created was real. The women he killed were real. And the questions he left behind continue to haunt us because they touch something fundamental about human nature. Our need to understand the incomprehensible, even when that understanding leads us into the darkest corners of human behavior. Thank you for joining this investigation into one of history's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. If this examination of the occult theory behind Jack the Ripper has left you with more questions than answers, you're not alone. Subscribe to Cult Files for more explorations into the dark intersections of crime, conspiracy, and cult behavior throughout history. Hit the notification bell to never miss a case. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying possibility isn't that evil is organized and intentional, but that it's random and meaningless. Until the next file is open, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep questioning the stories history tells us.